Can you guys hear us online? Feel free to unmute.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, if you can hear us, go ahead and give me a thumbs up in the chat. We can hear you.
Zooming. Can you hear and see us?
Yes.
See, Marshall Toburin, are you able to hear us and understand, or raise your hand if you need to?
No, you sound great. Can you hear me? Hmm.
And then is it Callie McLaughlin, Cassandra Taylor? If you can somehow signify that you can hear us, maybe raise your hand on your Zoom. Okay. Well, let's get started then. This will be a relatively short meeting. This is the Government Efficiency Task Force that was originally created about little over a year ago by Mayor Garner. The task force got off to a bad start last year, so we've now reconstituted and relaunching here today. I am Chris Steiniger. I'm the new chairperson of the task force. We've with us also Bill Johnson, the vice chair, and Doug Spangler here live. We have a number of members who've emailed in that they're either on vacation or out of town or can't participate, and then some that are on Zoom. So we'll try and keep this initial meeting short, more just to announce that we're going again and to make sure that our technology is working and to go over our agenda. So again, the goal of this task force, we're a non-binding task force, we're voluntary. We are not an elected body, so we can only give advisory opinions to the city commissioners, the UG commissioners. But the Mayor Garner created a number of task force that were to be advisory to he and the commission. These were created about a year and a half ago. Government Efficiency Task Force goal is to find ways to lower costs of the UG and BPU and other local government agencies that are part of the UG, and hopefully find a way to lower taxes and utility bills. He also asked that we try to look into issues of customer service, which can be broadly defined. Um, there's no real limit on what we look into other than time. And I would emphasize that this task force doesn't really have a paid staff, so we can't really tell anybody to do things for us. We have to do them ourselves. So to the extent that anybody wants special research done, it may be upon yourself to get that accomplished. So I want to go over our current list. One thing, even though the task force was not meeting the past 8 months or so, I myself have been volunteering here at City Hall on behalf of Mayor Garner. So I have been able to look into a few topics, but and these are just topics to get us launched, get our task force launched. I think we'll add additional topics as we go. But again, I emphasize we do not have a paid staff. Um, so it's incumbent on each of us to try and do our own research or be careful about asking for too much. So um, some of these sound a bit boring maybe, but they all add up to expenses, and they all add up to customer service one way or another, and they all add up to livability here in Wyandotte County. Wyandotte County has been increasingly difficult for poor folks to live in, and it's also become in some ways easier to access government via online, but and Zoom, but also a little more difficult to access government because it's hard to park in downtown, and sometimes it's hard to get into this building. So certainly as compared to how it was 20 or 30 years ago. So just going over our list, and this would have been on the email sent out to members of the task force. Number one, and these are not in any particular order, but parking in the downtown area. Um, this comes back, starts with the accessibility of City Hall. It used to be you could park next to the building for free and walk right in. And now we have meters, and we have quite a bit of reserved parking, reserved for people that never use their reserved parking. So we also have a number of parking garages. Most of those are gated. Some of those are reserved exclusively for employees of the UG, and some of these are pay lots that the public can use. And as an example, currently, the current policy is that almost every employee is assigned a specific spot in the parking garage or a parking lot. And if that person is away on sick time or vacation leave or at a training session, then that spot goes empty and unused. And what's common practice elsewhere in the country is to not assign one spot per person, but instead make it open parking. And usually you assign it at something like the 90 or 95%, where there may not be a parking spot for everybody if every employee shows up. And this is a way to be a little bit more efficient with parking as well. So this leads into the parking control department. We do have 5 or 6 employees. That's not a huge amount, but their job has dwindled a bit because the city government no longer charges their own employees to park downtown. It's kind of odd that you had to pay for your own parking when you worked here. But we would look at overall in terms of parking, just parking utilization. How can we be better at it? How can we free up more spaces for the public and for potential development in our downtown area? Maybe even looking at the idea of the parking meters on Minnesota Avenue. I would just note that there's not a huge demand. It's not like this is the Crossroads or the Power and Light District. There's not a huge demand in downtown KCK for parking. So why are we charging for parking? Maybe it should be made free, and it might entice more people to come here. Moving down, space, again, it's kind of a space utilization idea, but this city hall building that we're in has quite a bit of empty space and quite a bit of underutilized space. And at the same time, the UG is spending money on leasing office space elsewhere in the community. So we have empty space here in this building, but we're spending money to lease elsewhere. And that doesn't seem very efficient to me. And I observe and note that many employees spend a lot of time driving back and forth between their remote office location so they can come down here and attend a meeting. I worked here 30 years ago in City Hall, and at that time, all the city employees worked in this building. Everybody was here. So it was very efficient to have meetings. There was no driving around, and it saved a lot of time. I would note that this building is undergoing renovation in the bottom 2 levels. They had a lot of water intrusion, and those lower 2 levels had been previously used by the police department. The police department moved down the street to the former BPU headquarters. So that has freed up a lot of space in this building that's currently having some renovations to prevent water intrusion. So I hope that I ask that the task force to look into space utilization at City Hall. Is there a way to possibly move employees back here, back to the downtown, and stop leasing spaces elsewhere? And at the same time, making it easier for everybody to park, the employees and the customers, the public. That also flows over to doing business at the county courthouse. People have to drive there to get their automobile license plate or their automobile title, and also to do court duty. So we make it hard for the citizens to park because we've taken so much parking and made it not available to them. So items 1 and 2, parking and space utilization, are all about making the UG more efficient, spend less money on leasing, and at the same time, make it more accessible for the public. Number 3 is the Merck grocery store. This is the little grocery store built nearby here in downtown KCK. I personally did some preliminary work on that. We did a cost comparison of how much it costs per square foot to build the Merck grocery store. And we compared that to a couple of Aldi stores that were built about the same time. One of these Aldis was in the Piper area. The other one was in the Roland Park area. And I obtained the building permit costs for all 3 properties. And the Merck ended up costing almost triple what it cost Aldi to build a grocery store. So I'd like us to at least have some understanding of how did the UG approve or get themselves involved in building a grocery store that costs 3 times as much money. And then secondarily, we, the UG, therefore we, the taxpayers, are giving a $550,000 a year operating subsidy to the Merck. No other grocery store in the metro gets an operating subsidy, but the Merck does, and that comes out of our local budget. So 550,000 is a lot of money. That would be, you could hire 7 more policemen or 8 more police officers to patrol our streets for that amount of money. So it's something we should at least look into. The Merck, because we can't change it. It's already a done deal, but we at least need to understand for future endeavors, maybe how not to do a deal. Number 4 would be the bike share program. That's a small pilot program run out of the planning department. I'm sure it's well intended, but my preliminary research into this is that very few people are riding these bicycles. The UG paid quite a bit of money per bicycle, certainly a lot more than you can buy a bicycle at Walmart, about 5 or 6, 7 times as much as a Walmart bicycle, even though they pedal the same. The UG also paid for all the installation of the kiosks. And then we also pay an annual maintenance fee. I think it's $700 per bicycle to maintain the bikes. So it's questionable if the utilization is only 10% or less, should we continue to fund this experimental bicycle program. 5th is the UG and the BPU. There are some duplicated services and departments between the UG and BPU. Examples would be HR, information technology, and some others. I would just point out that the BPU is a department of the city, like the fire department or police department or public works department. It is operated separately. It's a separate board of directors. Bill will probably speak to that here in a moment. I'll give him a moment. But there is some duplication of services. Myself, many years ago, I was one of the people that advocated for the original consolidation of the city and the county governments because we had a lot of duplicated services and duplicated costs. That happened in 1997, and it resulted in the unified government, for good or for bad. But I think it's something at least worthy of looking into. And then final, number 6 would be customer service aspects of the UG. Again, this can range from availability of parking for people to come here to do business. It can also include the 311 call center. I would point out that 30 years ago, we had an actual live human that picked up the phone and answered the phone for Kansas City, Kansas. And today we have the 311 call center tree, which I believe there's a fair amount of citizen dissatisfaction with the way it works. So, but to me, it's a customer service issue. And then being just the days and hours of the week that the UG is open for business. You know, I don't expect this to be a quick trip that's open 24/7, but it would be nice if we're available more than 30 or 35 hours a week, especially for things like automobile license plates, things you have to have. So, and then number 7, the final of this initial list is the UG receives from the BPU free water and electricity, as well as maintenance of street lights, traffic signals, and fire hydrants. And I think most people know that there's nothing really free in this world. Somebody has to pay for it. And my personal opinion is when somebody believes they're receiving something for free, they don't tend to be frugal or careful with how they use it. If it's free, people tend to waste. So with Bill's help, we're going to try and get a really good idea, a really good estimate, or really the most accurate estimate we can of what is the cost of the freebies that the BPU is providing to the city government. So with that, Bill, do you have comments, please?
Well, only 2. So you're absolutely right on target with the free services. It comes to the tune of almost $50 million a year when you count in the amount of pilot we collect, payment in lieu of taxes, and turn that over monthly to the unified government. All the free services in addition to that, normally today's dollars are around $47-48 million based on what we estimate. UG charges 11.9% of all of BPU billed revenue, collected revenue. And so depending on the revenue, I mean, that number will go up and down. So it's not a fixed number. It's about twice what the national average is when you look at public power. And most public power, in the way I'm going to define it, is municipal electric and water utilities. When you get into the rural areas, sometimes people refer to that as the cooperative market as public power, but I'm sticking with the public power entities that typically are associated with cities and towns throughout Kansas and throughout the United States. There's about 2,000 or so of us that are members of American Public Power Association. And when you look at the top 50 or so, which BPU is in that range, most of them are operated in a structure similar to what we are. There's not too many that are departments, and BPU is you got to go back to the 1930s, 40s, somewhere around that point time, 20s or 30s, when BPU was actually a department of the city. I know Chris refers to BPU as a department. Chris may want us to be a department, but that's not the case. We're an administrative agency of the unified government. We have our own elected board of directors that operates and have assigned responsibilities to them by the charter ordinance. And the rest of the BPU is operated on a day-to-day basis by me as general manager and the executive team that I have in place there. Unlike other communities, we provide electric and water service. We do it under a cost of service model, which means the cost that it takes to operate the utility with a very small margin of reserves to help offset any unexpected costs, emergencies, and things like that that may arise. We really charge the community what it costs to operate the utility. Most public power utilities are very much more efficient in terms of what they do, and also in terms of all the contributions and the support that they provide back to the community, as opposed to investor-owned utilities like the large one here in Kansas City. That is a for-profit group. That is a for-profit utility, where we are a nonprofit utility. We provide a lot of support back to the community, in addition to collecting a lot of revenue for the unified government and transferring those revenues on a monthly basis, and all the free services that we provide to the unified government. As Chris said earlier, somebody pays that. Okay, and when I look at all of the accounts, all the buildings, all of the locations that the unified government has, all of those added up would put the unified government as a single account holder as a top 5 customer for BPU. So there's a lot there, and we can certainly dive into that. But the talk about combining departments and things like that, this is not the first time that's come up. It's come up in the past, so it's not anything new to some people that's participating in this. BPU and I in particular do all we can to streamline our operations, to make sure we're operating as efficiently. Before we even get too far into that type of conversation, I want to understand more about what the unified government is doing and how the unified government approaches business decisions and operational decisions similar to what BPU does. And they can demonstrate that their costs and their operations are run as efficient as they can. Otherwise, we've seen a tendency of costs being shifted from the unified government over to the BPU, and that's what came out in some of those earlier conversations about consolidating. It was basically a transfer of costs from the unified government to the Board of Public Utilities, and then what happens with that? BPU would then have to pay for it, and then that becomes higher rates for the people that we're trying to hold rates down on, and it would make us less competitive with all the other utilities, not only in the area, but in the state of Kansas. So BPU, and I can make comparisons to other utilities and say that our rates are very competitive. I can't say that we can say the same thing about our taxes, but so that would be one area that I would rather focus on first is how do you streamline some of the operations in this building throughout the unified government to make it more cost competitive with all the other cities and counties surrounding us. And then that, once we get that under control, that may lead to further discussions with some of the other task force as to now how do we go into economic development? How do we go into some of the other task force meetings and say, how do we make progress across the board there? And it'd be hard to do that when you're operating less efficiently as you can. So my starting point is to not look at transferring more cost to BPU to offset cost over here, but it is to look at how do you streamline and how do you make it easy for the public to access our local city and county government, to do business with our local city and county government, and to get the type of quality work and the satisfaction and the things that they need to be able to move forward with citizens, builders, developers within our community.
Okay, so there's a lot to look at for this task force. Bill mentions about the UG needing to be more efficient. We all agree about that. Government usually is not a very efficient model for providing services for people, and certainly the UG has not been good at it for many, many years, in my opinion. The UG does, like many cities, many city governments in our country do a lot of, I would use the word diverse functions. They do public works, which is trying to maintain the streets and the bridges and the curbs and the sidewalks and the parks. In addition to all the city buildings, city governments have a police department. Policing in some people's eyes is rather simple. It's actually kind of a complex operation that involves more than just driving around in a police car. There's a lot of the other functions of the police department that makes it a very diverse organization. We have the fire department's quite large here as well. That includes ambulance service, putting out fires, preventing fires, this type of thing. The UG also does some economic development. They have water pollution treatment plants, a lot of other functions here that are unique and diverse. So it's an organization that, it's not like McDonald's where your main function is to cook food and provide food to people, burgers, fries, whatever. The UG has a lot more diverse menu, shall we say, than most other private businesses, or even than the BPU provides electricity for us to use and water for us to use. And the UG has a lot of unique products that it provides, and they're not easy to do. I don't want anybody to think I'm a defender of the UG, because I'm not. But our job here is to try and find ways to be more efficient, save some money, and make it easier for people to live here in Wyandotte County. Bill hinted to the idea that the UG is passing off its own costs and expenses, and making the BPU put those on the BPU bill. And I think that's a bit unfair. I think it's also not very transparent. And this is a day and age when people seem to desire a little more transparency from their government. So we ought to be looking at ways it's not just who pays the bill. The idea is to make the bill smaller and make it easier for poor people to live here in Wyandotte County, poor and working class and middle class folks. I certainly agree with Bill that the pilot, or payment in lieu of taxes, that's on your BPU bill, that is actually a UG charge. It is substantially higher than what other people pay in the KC Metro or even in the Midwest. Again, it's not that the pilot, it's that the UG is spending too much money. If they spend less money, the pilot will be smaller. It's that simple. It's a mathematical function. So again, the task force is mainly going to try and look at ways to save money, be more efficient, save money, and use the savings to lower taxes and BP. And when I say BPU bills, I use that word because it's more than just the rate, the electric rate. It's also the other add-on charges, or more than just the water rate. It's the add-on charges. So I use the word BPU bill to refer to all that bill that we all have to pay. So there are a lot of add-on charges from the from the UG that, again, I just say they're not very transparent, but they all come from the fact that the UG spends too much money and doesn't spend it very well. So our task force is to ask tough questions. I myself was in political office here a long time. I no longer am. So I don't feel the need to be delicate or perhaps nice. I don't mind asking tough questions anymore, because I don't tend to run for office ever again. So I would just say my background includes 16 years in the state legislature. We oversaw a budget of in those days, about $16 billion. Now it's at $25 billion. But most applicable here is I served on the legislative audit committee, where we did performance audits of state agencies and programs. And I learned a lot from that about how to look at government functions and see if they're they're being efficient or not. So we hope to employ those types of skills. We do also have sitting here, former state rep Doug Spangler. I think you served on the budget committee for the legislature. So you're also pretty well qualified in looking at large budgets. Well, budgets a lot larger than these ones. Doug, do you have any comments? Would you like to say anything?
I do. It's a pleasure to be back with the committee. I see Marshall and Callie, Cassandra, and then we have Jeff Fisher online with us. And if Jeff, are you available for a comment? Can you hear us? Jeff Fisher?
I can hear you.
Okay. Jeff, I wanted to ask you, what is the status of the biosolids project? And can you give us an update? We picked up your biosolids information that was provided by the unified government and wanted to know if you had an update on estimated forecast of the revenue necessary to run this program, and then how you would collect that revenue.
I didn't see that on the agenda, so I didn't prepare for that. We have confirmed that the federal government has codified its tax credit program, so we're anticipating some relief on the increased cost of the project because of super inflation over the last couple of years. It went from an $80 million project to a $100 million project, so we have paused that. We also have put in a grant application to the USDA and are waiting feedback on that as we speak. And so we hope that between those two programs, grant and tax credit, we will save somewhere between $30 and $50 million off the price of that project. You know about the rest of it. Do you have any particular questions?
I do. Is this the current, this document here that we received, the Call Point Biosolids Project, it has some estimated cost. Are you saying that these costs on this sheet have been revised?
I don't know what you're holding. Like I said, there was no indication. I don't know. I can't.
I'm going to
I
hold
can barely.
the publication.
I can barely
hold the
see you, let alone your flyer.
Read the title to them. Read the title of the publication to them.
Jeff, this is that we've received here is called Investing in Our Future, Unified Government of Wyandotte County. It is a fold out and it describes a project cost breakdown. It called the Call Point Biosolids Project. And it discusses the cost and then how the revenue. So the cost, I understand, is an estimate here, and those may vary as you've described there. How would we collect the revenue to repay this money if we make an investment as an organization?
You know, that question has come up a few times, and I think you all have been around this business long enough to know that when local governments or state governments invest in infrastructure, they don't necessarily measure the return on investment in these cases. I will say that in this case, one of the appealing things about this project was that we could generate biogas and sell that biogas back to the market and generate revenues that the UG doesn't currently generate from its wastewater treatment plant, in addition to tipping fees. And I believe we estimated that total return on biogas and tipping fees to be somewhere in the neighborhood of $2 million a year.
I could not hear the estimate, but my hearing is bad.
They're estimating $2 million a year and the sale back to the market.
Okay, so the 2 million, that's the reference to on the pamphlet up to 2 million revenue, that's just a reference in biogas, right?
Biogas and tipping fees.
Okay, so the cost and the rest of it, I assume we would take out an ad valorem property taxes to spread across to all users.
You know, I've never seen an enterprise fund in my career in 3 different cities use taxes to pay for sewer investments made by an enterprise.
So then the only other source.
The answer is no. There is no taxes involved with this. It is the sewer rates that ratepayers pay, just like Bill does with electrical and water.
Okay, that's really the point I wanted to try to get to. I've tried to do some preliminary research on the current budget that Bill, General Manager Johnson spoke of earlier. Currently in last fiscal year, the unified government collected $42,180,000 from the BPU just on the payment in lieu of taxes for franchise tax, water tax, and franchise tax sewer, a combination of those. Now, itemizing those out on the budget expenditure analysis provided by the unified government, which we requested, the sewer tax in total for the operation was $5,970,000. So as a function of when our consumers, our ratepayers, and our residents get their BPU bill to support what General Manager Johnson spoke of, the rate is very competitive nationwide in terms of whether you're talking about cubic feet of water or kilowatts. However, when we add the taxes, so these are additional taxes upon the bill, which obviously the consumer pays. We pay for trash services. We pay for the pilot, the energy demand, the issues that General Manager Johnson spoke of. So I guess if there's some elasticity for consumers in consumer behavior in terms of paying for increased cost, if you need $100 million to do the biosolid project, this document that we've received says the cost estimate is between 80 and 100 million to establish this program. That's a capital. It's described as a project cost breakdown. So I think from my perspective of doing and dealing with municipal and public budgets now for, I hate to use the year. I haven't been here as long as Bill, and hopefully I won't be. Thank you, Bill. But at 40 some years, if I'm looking at a general fund budget of the unified government of 380 million and I'm asked to spend 120 in one capital project, that's a big ask. And so I'd like to see if we could get a response back, Mr. Chairman Steininger, of I want a source and use fund, I think, for capital projects. And I'd like to ask Bill to chime in on this with his experience at the BPU, and Marshall, as well as any of the other committee members. You know, if I'm going to go make a capital investment, I want to know what I'm buying. I want to know how much it costs. And then I want to know how I'm going to repay the money, just like we do in financial budgets at our households. If we're going to buy a nicer car, let's make sure we program all the insurance costs, the taxes, and the capital structure. I don't think it's too much to ask for this, according to this document. $100 million spend is a pretty big one. Being involved in municipal budgets now in different organizations, usually you see arguments over $60,000 and $150,000 for enhanced budget performance thing. And so I fully support your efforts, Jeff, and I know this has been a long time coming. The recognition from the consent decree has been here now, I think 39 years. Is that right, Bill? Yeah, 39 years. So I've admired your tenacity and your will to move this project forward. I've watched many online meetings. So from our perspective as a budgetary, these are one of the items that the mayor specifically asked us to look for, because I don't want to tell General Manager Johnson that I'm going to spend $120 million at the top end and then have him collect it on consumers with a monthly estimate average of $680 a month to repay the debt. Remember, if we borrow this money, we have financing fees, we have consulting fees to issue the debt. We have an annual interest rate now that spiked. I'm looking at bond buyer projects every day. I'm seeing 4.75 and 5. Some of the estimates when we started just the biosolids, we were down under 1%. So with that, I would welcome other comments for the committee. I don't mind buying. I don't mind buying something for $120 million, but I'd like some reassurance that we're not going to collect it all through the BPU, because if we do, we're going to increase our delinquency to the point where we'll put the BPU out of business. And I don't want to see that as a fundamental metric of a government operation. And I appreciate your time, Jeff. And I think the request has been asked concisely and clearly enough, and I look forward to receiving the information back to the entire committee, and I thank you.
So one thing I'll weigh in on, I mean, there's a lot there, and thank you for that. I mean, there's other things we'll certainly cover, but you know, this is a community, people that are financially struggling to get by. I think, you know, we hear that all the time with people calling in to pay the BPU bill and the UG charges on top of it. So I'm not immune to that. I mean, I'd certainly keep that front and center of a lot of decisions we're making at the Board of Public Utilities. This is an economically challenged community, and but you know, I also think that through our efforts going forward, not only should we continue to look at how do we help support people that are struggling, you know, how do we move forward in other areas to where we're not only keeping our costs down, but we're making Wyandotte County more attractive for people to move here. They can afford not just market-based housing. I mean, not just discounted price houses, but market-based housing. And they have disposable income that they can bring into the community, and we're seeing the benefit of that. And because we don't see that today. So how do we make ourselves more attractive to the surrounding communities, you know, focus on the economic development efforts that are still out there that I think that we can latch onto, and bring in additional revenue, additional rooftops, just, you know, to grow our residential population base. That will in turn grow our business population. And then that'll set us on a whole different course for the future. You know, I hear the low income, I get that, we get that, but I don't want to just stay there. I don't want to just have this whole conversation around cutting costs for people that are struggling. You know, we also should be looking at how are we making ourselves efficient so that we can attract other people. And when people are making certain amounts of income that can afford to live here or afford to live in Johnson County, why are we making ourselves more competitive with that? So I think that's something that I don't want to lose sight on either. And that's not talked about enough.
Then we had a hand raise. Kaylee, did you have a question?
I did, but I will refrain for now. And right now we're just kind of talking more about broad things.
Do other members who are on the Zoom side of things have questions? I see Jim Eichhoff has joined us as well. Kimberly, Jim, Cassandra, Callie. We're going to head towards wrap up here pretty quickly. So if you have a question, please raise your hand or comment.
Can you all hear me?
Kimberly, please go ahead.
Oh, great. I just wanted to say that I concur with the general manager and our thoughts around, yes, we understand we need to be fairly fiscally conservative right now, but we definitely need to be keeping an eye on the future piece of this and what this looks like in 5 to 10 years. Because as a small business owner and as a citizen here, I don't want to get stuck in a mentality of I can't have nice things because we live in an economically depressed area. because that's not attractive to me as a resident, and it's not attractive to me as a business owner. And it certainly won't be attractive to anyone potentially looking at this area to come invest in or do business in. So thank you.
Any other members from the listening anybody else from the listening audience? Comment or question? Okay, we've got
This is
just,
This
do
is
you want to
Kat
finish by
McLaughlin
4,
now.
if not sooner? Okay, well, I think this has been a good start. I want to reiterate that this is, kind of a volunteer effort. We don't really have a paid staffer, so research will be on our own. Maybe we can do some asking of staff for information, and we'll do that. I do try and work this through the city administrator's office. We have a new administrator here on board. I think people know David Johnston. So he has assigned or is assigning some amount of staff support for us. And I do appreciate the staffers that do tune in and listen. I'm pleasantly surprised by that. I know that the staff folks are pretty busy with other projects. One other thing I would say, my background comes from the state legislature. In the state legislature in Topeka, we have committees, had a committee process. You have a chair, a vice chair. We didn't really go with the co-chair idea. So I will intend to operate this more along the lines of the state legislature, whereas the chair, vice chair, the chairperson sets the agenda, vice chair takes over or assists, and we recognize members of the committee or task force to speak when we're here. So that'll be our operating style. And we have Jeff Fisher. I see your hand up again. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think Kaylee was trying to ask a question a minute ago. I just want to make sure she could.
It's okay. We're running short on time, and I think what I would say would open up a little bit of additional discussion. But for what it's worth, my comment has to deal with about how we treat tenants who are paying the pilots or renters who are paying the pilot versus the property owners, as well as how the pilot's displayed on the bill. There's a way that we could create the pie chart, as we are familiar with on our BPU bill, to show what percentage of the pilot goes to what major improvement projects or what categories, which I think is something that could be put on the bill to let people know what their money's going towards. There are some other things that directly impact people who are paying the bill that are not the pilot at all. And that has to do with the initial deposit of what the utilities cost just to get utilities turned on for the average person, the reconnect fees. Those are things that, yeah, the pilot's a $7 charge on the bill a month, but compared to my recent college graduate cohort who had to pay $1,000 or nearly $1,000, I believe it was like closer to $850 as a deposit for an electric deposit, when I'm in KC-Mo paying $52 to turn it on when I did. That's a substantial thing to have to pay when you're moving into a new apartment, or when you're looking to retain new talent, or people are moving around. You've got your first month's rent, you've got your first month's rent deposit, you have your electric deposit, gas deposit, and now it's nearly double. So it's like $5,000 off the top just to move here for that minimum. And so those are things that really impact people from the idea of starting service. And I think it's great to talk about the pilot, but I think that there's other ways that we can make impacts that are just as much, if not more, beneficial to the people in our community who are utilizing the service.
So thank you for that. Two things I'll speak to. One is we redesigned our bill about a year and a half or so ago, and with the intentions of further separating the BPU and the UG charges out so that you can see more as to, and they're on different pages. There's additional information that drills down a little bit deeper into what those separated charges are. If you've looked at that, okay, if you have any further questions about that, the one thing we can't answer at BPU, other than the standard answer that we get from the unified government, is when we collect pilot, where does the pilot go? The only thing I can tell you, it goes to the general fund. How does the unified government use that out of the general fund? That's for them to determine how they message that back to the public, because we can't do that as a utility. The other thing that you mentioned, we are having some conversations about deposits, and I am open to potentially lowering the deposits down to a more reasonable, affordable level. The one thing that BPU has to guard against is we always have to guard against write-offs, okay? And people that walk away from the utility, owing the utility huge sums of money that we send to collections. Sometimes we collect, sometimes we don't. But that's one of the areas that we still struggle with is controlling that. And with the amount of deposits that we've had, that was always one way of offsetting some of those write-offs in the future. So if you have a deposit, then you've got that money to go back and offset the cost of what we're losing. But I do know that that is a concern with the public. It's a concern with us, and we're looking into it. We'll probably be doing some policy adjustments and giving some people an opportunity to come into the utility, sign up for service cheaper, and then maybe doing something on the backside when they become a bad or a not good paying customer, maybe raise their fees at that point. Because the one thing that I've talked about is a lot of us have kids, and I'm concerned that a kid goes to a local university, a local college, move out of their parents' house, and they are finally able to get in, stand on their feet, him or her, and they haven't really established credit. So most of this is based on credit rating. And if they don't have any credit, then they're normally assigned a higher pilot because they don't have credit, and it's all based on that. So I'm open to, and we're still having the discussion at the utility. I'm open to lowering that, and then if they are a good paying customer, they will continue to enjoy a lower deposit. And by policy, if you are a good paying customer, all of those deposits are refunded back to you in 2 years. So it's not like BPU is collecting the money and keeping it. Whatever money we still have is because of those customers did not maintain a good paying record for the utility. So we're saving that to help safeguard ourselves in the future. But I am open to looking at that. Thank you for bringing it up.
And I appreciate that. It does make it very difficult for our younger people, and especially as we're trying to retain new talent and retrain people, or even get people to draw to the area for economic development. It's hard when they have that kind of thing right out the door, right after college or whatever their relocation is. It also is a lot difficult for people who are making a fresh start after COVID. Some of our houseless and unhoused populations who are trying to make that transition from a more group home setting or from a more managed, Section 8 kind of or voucher program. To start that is very difficult for them, especially because they're going to be impacted most, especially if we're going on a credit rating scale. I was also very surprised to come over here that we didn't have a way of having the deposits split up and added partially onto payments. I know some municipalities do an initial deposit and then add on the rest of it as an additional charge the whole time to take some of that initial weight off. So there's plenty of options there, and I appreciate that you're looking into that, because that does impact a lot of people. And I know the $7 on the bill for the pilot isn't very much when you're trying to figure out how to pay your $750 deposit even just to get service on, which is usually a person's entire paycheck after taxes and insurance and such.
So hopefully I would also like to and you probably already know this, but when you compare our utility to other utilities, we carry a higher percentage of accounts that are on payment arrangements than anybody else. So when I said earlier, BPU does a lot to support the community. We are stretching payments out, giving people a chance to spread out their costs. Now, at the end of the day, somehow we have to be able to collect that. But there are a large number of our accounts that are on payment arrangements. And all the work that we did during COVID on the moratoriums and everything else, we were in a moratorium position longer than any other utility in the state of Kansas. So, we understand that we're public power. We understand that we try to work with our community. we will always extend as much support as we can. And that's kind of who we are.
Okay, task force, we have one more person who'd like to address the task force. Gunnar Hand is here live. Gunnar is the Director of Planning for the UG. Gunnar, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Gunnar Hand, Director of Planning and Urban Design. I think I just wanted to extend planning and urban design's assistance with this task force as needed. Obviously, we are not the staff for this task force. We are not to administer any of these task forces, but like all other task forces, planning and urban design is committed to be in attendance to participate and or assist as needed. Specifically, I would point out that as we are going through the update to our citywide comprehensive plan, our intent is to use all of the mayor's task forces as one mechanism in our community outreach engagement platform. It is all the same conversation. It is all about the vision of our community. And so what that means functionally for us is I don't think that planning process, like typical planning process, will have its own stakeholder committee. These are the stakeholder committees of the comprehensive plan, and that's how we are applying that to that piece of specific work. And so again, anything that we can do, please let us know. Other task forces have discussed with us whatever they come up with as a final recommendation is an opportunity. Now, some might be projects, some might be policies, some might be other things that don't belong in a long-range comprehensive plan. But generally speaking, it is an opportunity to codify things that and the values that are identified by our community members in these task forces. So if there's anything we can do, please let us know.
Thank you, Gunnar. I would, I've sort of a planning thing, but for many, many, many years, I heard the various folks at the UG say that the UG has too many parcels. They have too much of a lot of things. But one of those is being too many parcels of land that the UG is responsible for. We have fully developed parks, but we also have a lot of UG owned property that was probably abandoned through a tax sale that is not big enough for a park. We have too many streets, too much infrastructure to maintain. I've heard that charge for 30 years about the UG. We have too much to maintain, too many streets, too many parks, too many buildings, too much of everything, and we have too much and we can't do a good job of it. So I hadn't thought of the planning dimension of especially these parcels, because all these empty lots that the UG either owns or they're in limbo because they're in the land bank or in the tax sale, or they're just abandoned property. All those properties get overgrown. Sometimes they get mowed, sometimes they don't. We have a lot of abandoned structures. We have a lot of right-of-way strips. For instance, up and down Parallel Parkway, there's a right-of-way strip that has to be mowed or maintained or have the weeds pulled out of it. So I had never thought of this exactly as a planning issue, but this county, this government needs to find a way to reduce the amount of infrastructure and land that is being taken care of by the UG or is not being taken care of by anybody. And I'm not exactly sure how that factors into planning, but maybe it's one example was the proposed new apartments at 5th and Central or 3rd and Central, that there's some little bits and pieces of land there that are designated park when there's really not enough land to make a usable park out of. Maybe there's a way to do something else with such parcels through the planning process. I don't know. I would also suggest to make it easier for people to develop their property, whether they're splitting a lot to build two houses or trying to combine properties combining lots to make one larger one, make those kinds of things easier. That's not exactly a government efficiency task force realm, but I know the UG has more to take care of than it can ever take care of. And that's something we have to look into. So maybe planning can be a part of that somehow. But thank you for your comments and willingness to help. Task force, anything else before we finish and adjourn? Any other comments from the listening audience? All right, well then, very good. I appreciate y'all's attendance. I know it's kind of small. We hope to get it pumped back up again. Our plan is to meet, or our goal is to meet every 2 weeks. We may switch this to Tuesdays or Wednesdays, another day of the week. Just keep your heads up on your email for the announcement for the next one in about 2 weeks. Thank you very much. We're finished.